For further perspective on the developments in Ivory Coast, I'm joined by Emira Woods of the Institute for Policy Studies. Welcome to In Focus, Emira.
A joy to be with you, Vincent, as always.
Happy to see you after a long time. Now, after witnessing the events in Ivory Coast, what do you think is the immediate challenge that Mr. Alassane Ouattara faces as he takes control of the country?
The challenges are many. First challenge is political reunification. We have to remember, after the 10 years of war and now these last few horrific months of violence, the tough challenge will be bridging all those divides that have torn the Ivory Coast apart, particularly over the last few months. So a government of national unity that brings all parties together under one umbrella, an army of national unity that reignites and brings together all the different parties and all the different parts of the country. I think that's also critical. But beyond the political needs, beyond that bridging and threading together the country, there are some severe economic challenges that lie ahead as well.
And I would like to talk about that a little later on. But you know, for all the international support that Mr. Ouattara has right now, there are many in Ivory Coast who consider him a stooge of the French. What do you think that is going to hurt him?
Well, clearly you see these dueling reports of who actually apprehended Gbagbo. Was it French forces? Was it forces loyal to Ouattara? And so I think these dueling reports are actually because this is a vital question. The extent to which the French have played, because they're the colonial masters, so to speak, right? They've played such a detrimental role in the Côte d'Ivoire's history. I think there is concern that they may have played a heavy hand here. But clearly what we had, UN Security Council Resolution 1975 was authorization for the United Nations to protect civilians. This is historic. The speed at which the UN acted and the manner in which the UN acted in the Ivory Coast. Again, there are lots of similarities with Libya here, but that resolution gave the UN authority essentially to protect civilians in a way that it hadn't before. And I think we have to understand that this created a scenario where the forces loyal to Ouattara were able to then move forward in what was essentially a military intervention in the Ivory Coast.
Now, President Alassane Ouattara has said that he's going to instruct his justice minister to bring charges against Mr. Gbagbo for crimes against Ivorians. What do you make of this in the face of similar accusations by human rights organizations that Alassane Ouattara forces have killed and raped people on their way to the State House?
Well, we have to remember there have been crimes on all sides. So clearly there have been crimes over the last 4 months, but in particular over the last 2 weeks, there have been reports. It's the Red Cross, it's the Human Rights Watch, it's local organizations that have been clamoring for justice, because what seems to have happened is this military operation really targeted civilians, and there was a massive disregard for human life and human dignity. So all sides need to be held accountable, and I think it is important, as the Gbagbo forces are being held accountable, that also the Ouattara supporters that were implicated in such massive violations of human rights also be held accountable as well.
Now, when we had an electoral dispute in Kenya sometime in 2007, the international community put pressure upon the two principals to come together and form a government of national unity. Similar scenario was witnessed in Zimbabwe, where Mr. MDC leader, rather, opposition leader, was forced to, or rather was persuaded to form a government of national unity along with President Mugabe. What we've seen in Ivory Coast, is it likely to change the way some people may expect things to play out when there is a dispute in the future?
Well, I think we have to be clear. This election in Côte d'Ivoire was very different. The UN was asked to play a visible role, a role that they don't play in every election. So you have to go to like East Timor to find similarities in terms of the extensiveness of the UN's involvement in monitoring these elections. So you had a National Election Commission as well as a UN certifying the results of these elections. And the results showed that, in fact, Ouattara was the victor of the election that Gbagbo had lost. And yet Gbagbo, as the sitting president, refused to accept the results of those elections. So what you had was the regional body, Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, actually reinforcing and recognizing Ouattara as the winner, reinforcing the results of the elections. And then you had the African Union, through its long and torturous process, in the end, also reinforce the results of the election that Ouattara was the winner of the elections in November. So I think there was a regional consensus, a continental consensus, and actually this was not the case either in Kenya nor in Zimbabwe.
Now, very briefly, what do you make of the African Union proposals and efforts in Ivory Coast?
Well, I think the African Union has been playing a very high-profile role. It's both the Ivory Coast and Libya, where they've been playing this critical role in trying to forge a path to peace that does not rely on military intervention, understanding that military solutions to these political crises may not actually benefit the country in the long term. And so I think it's both in the Ivory Coast and, again, in Libya, where you see this high visibility role of the African Union and the Peace and Security Council, particularly within the African Union, trying to carve out a negotiated resolution.
But does it have that much influence?
Well, clearly, in the case of the Ivory Coast, this roadmap that would urge Ouattara to bring all sides together in a government that represents the entire country, to bridge together an army that represents the entire country. I think those are some of the recommendations from the African Union and the Economic Community of West African States that are actually reflecting the will of the Ivorian people. It is those steps that are needed today.
Well, thank you very much, Emira, for giving us those insights.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
That's right. Now, Emira Woods of the Institute of Policy Studies joined us here on In Focus. Thank you very much.